Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, many different styles, but if people were to ask me about this brewery, I think it probably is still fair to say that these guys are best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs. They're also one of the best known names when it comes to Swedish craft beer, and they are a brewery that I would highly recommend that you check out. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style that I have had from them before, although the sub-style is one that I don't think we've had from them before, if memory serves me correctly. I could be wrong though, because we've had many beers from these guys in the past, but this is also a very special beer for these guys. It's a fairly recent release through Stigbergets here in Sweden too, so yeah, it is supposed to be pretty damn good actually. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good one. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up toward Gothenburg once again, Göteborg as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast. Got to get that Gothenburg catchphrase in when we review the Gothenburg beers because it is just channel tradition these days. But for this review then, we are going to return to the wonderful Stigbergets Bryggeri. So this particular beer is simply called Cake. It comes in at 12% ABV, and this one is an Imperial pastry stout that was brewed to celebrate their 10th anniversary. Now, if memory serves me correctly, this beer was released just before I went to Japan, so I want to say that that would be sometime in early March that they released this one. And I think this one came through the Tillfälligt assortment as well, so I have been sitting on this one a little bit, but the main reason for that was that I had all the technical problems with my phone and stuff like that before I went to Japan, so couldn't review this one at the time that I wanted. But still, 12% Imperial Stout, I'm sure it'll have held up pretty damn well, and this one was released along, was it with the Triple Mos, if I remember correctly, was the name of the IPA that they released for their 10th anniversary. But yeah, they're describing this one as a bourbon barrel-aged vanilla hazelnut donut brownie marshmallow cookie Imperial Stout, and it says it was brewed back in 2021. So yeah, let's crack on with this then and see what it's all about. If memory serves me correctly, this is my first outright pastry stout that I've had from Stigbergets Bryggeri. We've had Imperial coffee stouts, old school Russian Imperial stouts, Imperial milk stouts I think as well from these guys, but never an Imperial pastry stout as far as I can remember. But we've reviewed somewhere in the region of like 80 beers from these guys over the years, so one of the most reviewed breweries here on the channel, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Stigbergets Bryggeri before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go into the homepage, use the search bar, put your hometown, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever you like in there. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Swedish playlist along with many other things, and that is of course constantly being added to, and there are playlists there for many other countries as well. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I will tell you once again a little bit about Stigbergets Bryggeri. So, Stigbergets Bryggeri, as I've mentioned already, are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast, and the company was founded by Nils Hultkrantz and Richard Simonsson. So, these two guys owned two bars that share the one kitchen. This is Bar Kino and the Hagabjörns Cafe, which can be found on Linnegatan in the city, and these opened back in 2007. But this building that they're located in is actually an independent cinema, and I didn't know this until I actually went to visit it when back in, what was it, about October 2019 or something like that. But yeah, originally the idea that they had was to brew a few beers that they could sell in the bars, but this led to them kegging and selling the beer to other pubs, and eventually to bottling the beers, which began in November of 2014. But of course it says here their anniversary is, this is the 10th anniversary of the brewery, so they obviously started brewing back in 2013. The very first beers that Stigbergets produced, of course, were English and German styles, but they soon began to experiment with the more hoppy American styles of beer, and this is where Stigbergets really started to make its name. So the original head brewer was Ole Anderson, who is one of the co-owners of OO Brewing. He stayed with the company until April of 2017, but around sort of 2014, 2015, 2016, Stigbergets were one of the breweries that were instrumental in kicking off the New England hazy craze in Sweden. So you had the GBG Beer Wheat Beer for 2016, and then you had the Amazing Haze, and you also had the Narangi, which was released by Ole's own company, OO Brewing. Brewski, of course, were doing some really interesting things at that time, but nothing regular, if you like. Conan the Barbarian is one that always sticks in mind. Opie Gorge released the new Sweden IPA around the same time, and then you also had the Fata Morgana from Omnipoyo up in Stockholm. So these are the kind of iconic Swedish New England IPAs that really kicked things off, and Stigbergets were kind of at the heart of that, especially Ole Anderson. But like I said, he left the company in April of 2017 to focus full-time on OO Brewing, and he was replaced for a short period of time by Barnaby Struve, who was one of the vice presidents at Three Floyds Brewing in Munster, Indiana, just close to Chicago over in the US, but he only stayed for about 3 or 4 months, if memory serves me correctly. But around this time they moved to a new brewery at Partihalarna, where they were brewing 5,000 litre batches at a time, and they also began to work on some sour beers in this facility as well. But then they started selling their beers in the 440 millilitre cans such as this one, as opposed to the 330 millilitre bottles that they had before, and this allowed them to export their beers a lot more and get their name out across the European continent. These days though, they have a brew team of Ollie Banks, who used to work for Beavertown in London, and also Lucas Munreid, who used to work for All In Brewing, one of the numerous gypsy breweries operating in the Gothenburg area. And then later on in the summer of 2020 they opened a second brewery in Ringen, where they were brewing some lambic beer as well, and they were saying that there was going to be the possibility for some swimming facilities and stuff like this. They opened up a bar in Stockholm in April of 2020, and then also their own folkale shop in Gothenburg as well. This year though, in May 2023, they announced that the Ringen brewery is going to close and all future production will take place at Partihalarna. But that is a big facility, so I don't see that affecting the company madly much, to be honest with you. Maybe just a little bit less room for barrel projects and things like this. But over the years they've continued to develop their brewery infrastructure, create new recipes and so on, and as of May 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 240 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. But yeah, as I say, this brewery really made their name for the New England Hazy IPAs. The new and improved GBG Beer Wheat Beer is one that you should try, as well as the Amazing Haze, two of the iconic IPAs of the Swedish craft beer scene. But yeah, that is a very quick history of Stigbergets Bryggeri, I would say. And if you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and actually have a look at this beer itself and see what it's all about. So as you can see, the artwork on this one is kind of similar to what we've seen from Stigbergets over the years. There you can see the Stigbergets symbol on the top of the can there. You can also see 2013 to 2023, and you've got a number of the different characters or animals that have appeared on the Stigbergets labels over the years. They're just sitting around a donut table, which is quite nice. Plain silver top on the can there. You can see Stigbergets' 10th anniversary on the back there as well. But yeah, it does look very, very nice, this one, in terms of the artwork, I have to say. I honestly can't remember what I paid for this can. It's probably in the region of like 100 Swedish kroner, but I want to say 80 for some reason. I really couldn't tell you why, but I think I paid about 100 or maybe 110 or something like that for this one. So if it was 100 kroner, that translates to roughly about €9 today. So about £8 sterling, somewhere in the region of like, yeah, $10 American, something like that. But yeah, that gives you an idea of the price of this one. But as we said earlier, it's a 12% bourbon barrel-aged vanilla, hazelnut, donut, brownie, marshmallow, cookie, imperial stout. In short, it's a pastry stout, this one, and it was released through Systembolaget here in Sweden sometime in the middle, just before the middle of March 2023. The artwork on this one, incidentally, is by Neil Paling, and he's done many artworks for Stigbergets in the past. So let's just get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. I don't think we need to say anything else about the can on this one, but let's do this and see what we have. Now, I should always say as well that pastry stouts for me are very much a hit or a miss, to be honest. They can be done very, very well, or they can just be like far too sweet for me. So I'm curious to see how Stigbergets are going to interpret this style, because like I say, I'm pretty sure I haven't had a pastry stout from these guys before. But yeah, anyway, you can see this beer's poured pretty much as you would expect from any Imperial stout. You've got about a quarter finger of a frothy, I would say quite dark tan head there, and that is fading away to be a very thin foamy layer on the top of the beer. But then round the edge of the glass, you've got a little bit of a more kind of foamy ring there. You can see it's kind of medium-sized bubbles. It's not too foamy, and that has faded away a little bit since we since we actually poured the beer. But yeah, in terms of the colour of this one, it's pretty much as you would expect. A lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging you do or adjuncts you put in can affect the colour of your beer as well. When it comes to black beers like Imperial stouts or porters, though, it's very difficult to actually affect the colour of these with adjuncts or barrel aging. You can do it a little bit more easily with the likes of barley wines, doppelbocks, quadruples, the more brown coloured beers, of course. But yeah, this one, lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. If we shine the light through this one, it does give you a little bit of that kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi coloured edge to it, but it looks very, very nice. As I say, big bubbles, one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass there, a few little ones going up towards the surface there. But overall, it looks pretty nice, this beer, and pretty much as you would expect from any Imperial stout, to be honest with you. So yeah, I think that's everything that we really need to say about the appearance of the beer. We can have a wee look at the aroma and just see what it's all about. So let's do this. Oh yeah, now I'm going to say this does smell quite interesting. When you just let it settle, the aroma really isn't that pungent in this one. It just smells like cookie dough. You know, if you take cookie dough out of the freezer and take that cookie dough out of the freezer that you have, cut it up and then put it on the baking tray. That's what this beer smells like, to be quite honest with you. And you have to sugar it up a little bit to actually get the some of the bourbon barrel out of this one. So that's quite interesting to note as well. Yeah. So aroma-wise, this is certainly quite interesting, actually. So for me, yeah, I think it really just smells like cookie dough, this beer, to be honest with you. But you get more and more out of it as the beer kind of opens up, if you can say that. So, yeah, let's try and just break this down a wee bit and describe it for you a bit more in depth. The backbone of the beer, you really have to search for some of these notes, actually. You can smell a little bit of that smooth American oaky character in there. So lovely smooth American oak. There's a little tiny touch of vanilla in this one within the wood. And you can smell a wee bit of the kind of bourbon sugar, but then above that, it's pretty much all cookie dough. Like you can smell that, chocolate chip cookie dough type note just sitting on top of it. You can smell the sort of sponge cakey, donutty type stuff for sure. It didn't actually say on the website how they'd made this beer, if they had actually put donuts or icing sugar or whatever into this one, but yeah, I mean, it really is quite interesting in that particular sense. So on the how do you say, on top of the kind of cookie dough, it is almost like a kind of cookie dough backbone that this beer has. Then you've got the kind of sweet, donutty, sponge cakey type thing. Above that, you do start to get, within the kind of sponge cakey sort of thing, instantly, you do smell the vanilla. It's almost like a kind of vanilla sponge that you get out of this beer. And then above that, you can smell a mix of chocolate and brown sugars. It's kind of like a more cocoa nibby chocolate that you get out of this one. So yeah, there's a little bit of that kind of cocoa nibby dryness for sure. Yeah, cocoa nibby dryness in there. You have a little bit of that, how would you say? Yeah, a little bit of kind of cocoa nibby dryness in there for me. Then you have a little bit more brown sugar sitting on top of that. So there is a wee bit of a kind of leathery, brown sugary type note coming out of this beer, definitely. So yeah, you do smell. I do wonder how long the wort boil on this beer has been actually, because you do get that nice little bit of leathery brown sugar. You've got a bit of cocoa nib behind it. There's a wee bit of there's a wee bit of sweet oily caramel in there. You've got a little bit of treacle molasses as well, a little bit of McVitie's digestive biscuit. Yeah, the way that that goes together is pretty nice actually. Yeah, so as I say, you've got that nice, you just have a mix of that. You've got treacle molasses in there, a bit of sweet caramel, a little touch of biscuit incidentally as well, then the leathery brown sugars and the wee bit of kind of, and that little bit of kind of cocoa nib behind it actually. You do get a little touch of dark chocolate out of this one and milky chocolate as well, but other than that it's quite, yeah, it's kind of straightforward in a sense. It goes together really nicely for sure. Yeah, I like the way this beer goes about its business, we can definitely say that. Yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the kind of malty and yeasty side of the beer, to be quite honest with you. Yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, and this is one of the things we have to remember, an Imperial Stout is not the most hop-forward style of beer in the world, you can remember that, so yeah. You are getting, and this one's bourbon barrel aged as well, so a lot of the hoppy character will have dropped out. You can of course keep this beer and age it for a little bit if you really want to, and then the hoppy character is going to drop out even more. But I still get quite a little bit of, yeah, I still get quite a little bit of kind of hoppy character coming out of this one. There's a little bit of earthiness in there and a little bit of herbal character. You've also got some really nice floral aromaticity coming out of this beer as well, and a little bit of grassiness. The floral notes, I should say, are very muted, and the grassiness is just quite muted, but also a little bit wet. But you certainly do get these elements kind of pushing their way out of this one, which is certainly quite nice, I have to say that. Yeah, I don't think we need to say anything more about the green component, but the more that you smell of it, the more that you smell of this beer, generally speaking, you get a bit of the wood, you get a bit of the cookie dough, and then you get a bit of the earthy herbal character from the hops. Let's focus on the fruity things then, just to kind of round off the. Let's just focus on the fruity things to kind of round off the notes in this beer. So for me, the more that you smell of this one, the more you start to get some kind of sharper notes coming out of it. So you can smell that sharp raisiny note in there. There's a little bit of a kind of oily plum. So a little bit of raisin, a little bit of an oily plum. And then you have a little bit of raisin, a little bit of oily plum, and then underneath that you get some figgy notes, and the figgy notes are quite juicy actually in this one, which is interesting. And then yeah, you get a little bit of the softer black currant for sure, and a little bit of the blackberry as well, which is very, very nice. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that particular sense is really, really quite nice actually. So. Yeah, it's the fruity side of this beer, quite soft, but it has a little bit of sharpness to it. I think we'll get more fruitiness out of this one when we actually taste it, to be honest with you. But as I always say, take a bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But yeah, we're going to get stuck into this one now and see what it's all about. This is my Sunday afternoon beer when I've done all my work. So yeah, I'm going to sit and enjoy this, sip on it, watch a film, and that will be my Sunday afternoon. So, yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see what it's all about. This is the Cake, a bourbon barrel-aged vanilla hazelnut donut brownie marshmallow cookie Imperial Stout at 12% ABV to celebrate Stigbergets' 10th birthday. So, our 10th anniversary, whatever we're going to call it. So, yeah, interesting. I didn't get so much of the nuts and things out of this one, but we'll see if that comes out in the flavour. But let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers, and gratis to Stigbergets. Let's do this. Yeah, that's pretty nice. Now, for me, this really kind of is like a quintessential pastry stout. And as I've said to you, this style can be a hit or a miss for me. And I have to say, this one, it's nice on the pastry for for it being a quintessential pastry stout. You can tell it's a well done beer. But one of the things that has always put me off this particular style of beer is the kind of granola type character that you can get out of these. I have to admit, I am much more a fan of like an old school Russian Imperial stout, or an Imperial milk stout, or an Imperial coffee stout, something like this. Like I say, the granola savoury type thing that you get out of pastry stouts it just never stuck with me in the same way that a number of other things did. But I can say it's a nice enough pastry stout, this one, for me. But like I say, compared to some other reviewers, I'm sure, I know some reviewers absolutely love pastry stouts like this, but they're just not my favourite type of Imperial stout, I have to say that. But I can say this is a really nicely done beer, and I can drink this one, I can sip on this and enjoy it for sure, which is a good sign for me. I have had pastry stouts in the past from a few breweries who are very, very good all round, and even regarded as very good within the pastry stout category, and they've just, I just haven't enjoyed them that much. But we'll see, we'll take a few sips of this one and just kind of see how it goes actually. But this is very much one of these savoury pastry stout beers. It's not like one of the more kind of flavoured and sweet type things that you're going to get from the likes of Omnipollo or something like this. It's definitely more of a sort of savoury type pastry stout. So yeah, it's interesting for sure, and as I say, it's got quite a little bit of sweetness in the beginning, but then it just sort of dries out and gives you more of that kind of savoury type character the further into the aftertaste that you go. But it is a nice beer actually, I have to say that. It really gets quite dry in the aftertaste as well. So yeah, let's just try and break this beer down and describe it for you a little bit more in depth actually. So backbone of this beer, you can feel that nice, smooth American oak character there. And I have to say, that is one thing about this beer that's a bit surprising. The bourbon barrel aging takes a little bit of time to come out in the aftertaste, and it does take a back seat compared to other things that are going on in this beer. So that is definitely worth noting with this one. So for me, on top of the kind of wood, on top of the, you can smell that, you can taste that smooth American oak in there. Further forward on that front third of your palate, or that middle third of your palate, sorry, you do get a little bit of the vanilla in there, and then above that you have a wee bit of a little bit of that more bourbon kind of brown sugar there, and that does take a wee bit of time to kind of show its face into the aftertaste. I think your mouth just has to kind of adjust to all the other flavours that are going on in this one, because this is quite a busy beer in that sense. But above the bourbon brown sugars, you can feel there's a little bit of a roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crusty sort of thing. But you could also describe it as being like, the bit of a cake that gets stuck to the side of the baking tray. You could describe it as that. So, yeah, that's definitely something to think about with this one. So yeah, you've got that nice kind of cakey edge to it, and then above that you can feel there is quite a dry, like cocoa nibby, brown sugary, sponge cakey layer in there, and that's kind of interesting too. And within that layer you start to get some of the nutty qualities out of this beer. Was it hazelnuts they said? Yeah, hazelnuts in this one, so you certainly get a little bit of that. The other way you could describe the base of that, just above the bourbon brown sugars, you could say it's like a really thick, dense chocolate brownie actually, but it has a wee bit more dryness to it. So yeah, maybe like a well-fired bread crust, you know, sort of dry cake edge chocolate brownie. Then yeah, you get this sort of sponge cakey note in there that's got a good bit of dry brown sugar to it, some nutty characters in there, and then above that you start to get some of the kind of cookie dough sweetness actually, and then you get the sort of white donutty type flavour, and the donutty flavour is where you get the kind of vanilla notes coming out of this beer. So this beer is really interesting from that particular perspective. So yeah. So yeah, definitely a few interesting things going on in this beer for me actually. But yeah, the as I say, the can certainly say that the above the kind of donutty layer you start to get some of the kind of chocolatey notes out of this one, and at the back, so a lot of the complexity in this beer is certainly in that middle third of the palate. So above the donutty layer you can feel at the back of that middle third of your palate you start to get the dry cocoa nibby notes in there, and then as you move further forward with this one, you start to get the dry brown sugary notes there, and it is, you know, it's kind of a mix of cookie dough and a bit of like a dry honeycomb caramel type thing. So yeah, you've got the dry cocoa nibs at the back of that middle third of your palate, then as you move further forward it gives you more of a kind of honeycomb, it gives you a little bit of a more kind of honeycomb kind of cookie dough type thing. So yeah, that's interesting. Then above that, in the middle of your palate, you've got this little circle there, and it's a straight up sweet caramel that comes out of this one. It's got a little bit of toasty dryness underneath it, but yeah, a straight up sweet caramel is what comes out of this beer after that. Yeah, the way that goes together is pretty damn nice as well actually. It's such a layered beer, this one, and the way everything goes together is quite interesting. Yeah, I think that's everything we really need to say about the middle third of the palate in this beer. There's a lot going on, and that is obviously the most complex part of the beer. So let's look at the other parts then. The border region between middle and back third of your palate, again you get a little bit of that bready build up in there. It's a little bit like a kind of mix of the kind of chocolate sponge and the donut. But then on the back third of the palate you've got similar layers, they just come out in a different way. So you do have the kind of woody character in there, which is a little bit drier. As I've always said, drier, more bitter flavours come out further back on the palate. You've got a little bit of the bourbon sugar in there, which is again drier. Then you've got that kind of chocolate brownie. Yeah, you've got that kind of chocolate brownie type layer in there. Yeah, so as I say, chocolate brownie, kind of well-fired cake edge, and then above that you start to get the kind of brown sugary sponge cake that I was talking about, and then you get the kind of white donutty layer. And both of those layers are a lot more tall and airy on the back third of the palate than they are further forward. On top of all of that, you can feel there's a kind of dry cocoa nibby type edge to this one, which is really nice. And then above all of that, you start to get some of the yeasty components out of the beer. So let's have a wee look at those more yeasty notes coming out of it. So yeah, above all of that, you have a really nice as I say, you get the yeasty notes coming out of this beer, and it's a mix of like a cakey and sort of farmhousey brown bread that you get. There's a bit of honeycomb wrapped in. There's a bit of woodiness, a bit of cracker and stuff like that. So you can certainly feel that the back third of the palate, the flavour is taller. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together. So yeah, the way that goes together is really quite nice in this one. I like that about this beer. So yeah, it goes together really nicely, I have to say that. On the hoppy side of things then, I think we've said everything we needed at the malty and yeasty side of this beer. On the hoppy side of things, as I said earlier, a lot of the hoppy character will drop out of this beer the more that you age it, and the fact is that it's not a hop forward style, and it is bourbon barrel aged already, but you still get some of the hoppy components out of this beer. In the back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness to this one. You've got a little bit of herbal character in there, and then as you push further forward towards the kind of front corners of your palate, it's got a little bit more of a kind of floral aromatic sort of thing coming out of this one. And then round the front curve of the tongue, you have a little bit more of a light grassiness there. Now the green component in this beer is not madly pungent, I would say. So yeah, the way that the beer goes together in that particular sense is it just adds a little bit more complexity to the overall thing. But yeah, you do get a little bit of hoppy dryness and bitterness out of this one. It is worth noting. So the border region, we'll talk about the front third of your palate now and the fruity side of things with this beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a little bit of bready build up in this one. It's a mix of like that chocolate sponge cake and a little bit of the donutty character as well, but also a little bit of a kind of wholemeal brown bread. The base of that front third of your palate, you've got the woody character, you've got the bourbon kind of brown sugars in there, and then you have the just a little bit of the kind of chocolate cakey type stuff, and then you've got that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer as well. So yeah, the way that goes together is really quite nice as well. Yeah, the front third of your palate, of course, is showing you the sweetest side of the beer, in my opinion, and the fruity notes are quite interesting as well. It's almost like above, on the base of that fruity side of the beer, you've almost got like just a little touch of a kind of candied strawberry type thing. But let's look at those fruity characters a wee bit more in depth. So yeah, when you take this beer in, you've got a little bit more of a kind of fruity sharpness in there. You do get a little bit of a raisiny type quality to the beer, but that kind of disapparates, or whatever you want to say. It kind of vanishes quite quickly. But then underneath that, you've got a nice juicy kind of plum. You do get a slightly drier prune under that. And then at the back of that front third of your palate, you can feel like the base layer is kind of like a juicy fig, to be honest with you. And the figs get a little bit brighter as you come further forward toward the middle of that front third of your palate. And then as you reach the into the kind of front half of that front third of your palate, you get a little bit more of like a black currant coming out of the beer, and then a blackberry on top of it. So yeah, I really do like how all of these things kind of piece together in this particular beer. The way it all works is really quite nice. But yeah, into the aftertaste you get more of the black currant on the front half of the front third of your palate, and then the oily blackberry. So it's an interesting beer, this one, actually. As I say, I'm not a massive fan of these kind of granola-y, cakey, dry Imperial pastry stouts. Like back in the day, the Omnipollo ones were always just a little bit sweeter and more chocolatey and caramelly than these ones are, whereas this one really is more like a kind of sponge cake and granola type thing. So I will be straight up and say this is not my favourite stout that I've had from the Stigbergets over the years. I mean, I've had probably one of the best ones that I've had from these guys was the Trouble Sleep, which was an Imperial coffee stout, and there was also another one that was like a partner to that. So that's probably one of the best Imperial stouts I've had from these guys. And I do also have a can of one that I'll review later on that's, I want to say it's a collaboration with High Coast Distillery or Smugen, one of the Swedish whiskey distilleries, and I've got good feelings about that one. But yeah, for me, there's nothing. It's a bit of a strange thing to say. There's nothing kind of wrong with this stout for me. It's a good Imperial pastry stout, but this is just a style that I don't quite enjoy as much as I do a Russian Imperial stout, an Imperial milk stout, or an Imperial coffee stout. For me, it's a nice example of an Imperial pastry stout, but this is just a style that's not. It's just not one of the ones that really gives me as much joy as the other ones that I've just mentioned. I think we can put it like that. But yeah, solid Imperial pastry stout, this one, and you cannot knock Stigbergets for this. If you enjoy Imperial pastry stouts, I'm sure you will enjoy this beer. And I've enjoyed it as well, in fairness, as well. It's one of the better Imperial pastry stouts, one of the better, more savoury Imperial pastry stouts that I've come across, actually. So yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel of this one then, to round off, yeah, it's pretty much at the bottom end of full bodied for me. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It's got an oily, kind of silky type mouthfeel to it. There is a good little bit of bitterness and dryness to this one. I wouldn't be surprised if this beer is somewhere in the region of like 60, 70 IBUs, but it's quite easy to conflate the dryness and the bitterness in this one. So that's definitely worth pointing out, actually. So yeah, good mix of things going on in this beer. You've got the nice woody dryness in this one. You've got a good little bit of, I should say, kind of sweeter, cakey type notes and a bit of dryness in there, a bit of brown sugar. So the malt base for me in this beer is quite complex, but at the same time quite dry. The fruity notes I think are very nice. A little bit of sharpness in the beginning, but then it really kind of becomes a bit more oily and juicy the further into the aftertaste you go as well. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, is really, really nice, and it gets a big thumbs up from me in that sense. Like I say, very good Imperial pastry stout, but a style that is a bit of an acquired taste for me. I'm still kind of, I don't know if it's just a case of getting used to these, but I just don't quite enjoy them as much as RIS, Imperial Coffee Stout, or Imperial Milk Stout as of yet. We'll see how things go. But this is one that I thought would be quite nice to try, since it is their 10th anniversary Imperial Stout. And they called it cake. It tastes like cake, so you know, you can't really knock them too much. But yeah, let's leave it at that. This was the Cake, a 12% Imperial pastry stout to celebrate their 10th birthday, 10th anniversary, whatever you want to say, from Stigbergets Bryggeri in Gothenburg here in Sweden. So yeah, until the next time, Slanget Skål, cheers, thank you for watching my reviews. Please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Stigbergets Bryggeri as well. Check out my social media, check out theirs. A little bit of a longer review this time because there's quite a bit of stuff going on in this beer, but I will catch you in another review very, very soon. Slanget Skål, and cheers.